Good morning, radio stations. We're about to get the daily press briefing on the way. So please stand by. We'll get going in 60 seconds. Good morning again, radio stations. I apologize for the delay. We'll get going in 30 seconds. Okay, in 10 seconds, we're going live. 5, 4, 3, 2.
Good morning, one and all, and welcome to yet another of the press briefings hosted by the Office of the Prime Minister post-Hurricane Maria. I am Kamala John Baptist Aaron, Press Secretary. This morning, the focus of the press briefing will be on housing, lands and water resource management. We'll have the press briefing from that ministry. Without question, based on the level of devastation brought on by Hurricane Maria on September 18, 2017, an update on housing and the damage posed by Hurricane Maria in numbers, in exact figures, would no doubt be one of the most critical updates to date. And so we look forward to hearing from all of the speakers this morning. Just to let you know, we have present here the Minister for Housing, Lands and Water Resource Management, Honourable Reginald Austrie, who is the Member of Parliament for the Cottage constituency since 1995. In fact, the longest serving Member of Parliament in the Parliament of Dominica. We also have the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Water Resource Management, Mr. Lucian Blackmore. We also have with us Hilarion Jules, who is the Housing Manager here in Dominica, and Mr. Bernard Lloyd, the Senior Property Valuer. What we will have first, before we get an update from the Minister on the policy direction of that ministry, we will get first an update from the Permanent Secretary about the state of play of the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Water Resource Management, Mr. Lucian Blackmore. We now call him to the podium.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Aaron. Let me say a pleasant good morning to the media in here. And of course, let me recognize the presence of Honorable Reginald Austrie, the Minister for Housing, Land and Water Resource Management, Mr. Hilarion Jules, who is the Housing Manager, and of course with us, Mr. Bernard Lloyd, who is the Senior Property Valuer in the Ministry. I want to say it's a pleasure for us to be here. We know that housing is a very important subject matter. It's a basic need. It's a fundamental human right. It's a social priority. And it's also a serious economic factor in our whole development. We have been through quite a tremendous amount at this point. As you know, we have three distinct stages of the entire response to Tropical Storm Maria. We have the relief, the recovery, and of course, the reconstruction. As you will well imagine, there is no static or definite end to any of those processes, since that the relief and recovery will happen almost simultaneously. So this morning, we will seek to give you some sort of background in terms of the effect of the damage of Maria, Hurricane Maria, on the entire building sector, more so the residential housing sector, the impact, and of course from the impact we'll consider the consequences, and from the consequences that is of course inform government strategy and our whole policy formulation and action plan going forward. And of course, we on the technical side will seek to give you a very good appreciation of the impact of the damage on our housing stock in Dominica. And Mr. Jules has been our focal point in the ministry in interfacing with the various partners, especially the humanitarian groups from the global community, and of course the other humanitarian group locally. Mr. Bernard Lloyd is our property valuer, so of course he will talk on the issue of property cost and valuation. Of course, we will recall that the impact of Maria has been very tremendous on the housing stock of Dominica, since that about 90% of our buildings were affected in one way or the other. We have gone through some basic classification to give you the idea of the level of damage that we have sustained, and we have categorized them, of course, into no damage, in which we have about 10% of costs. Those that were slightly damaged, meaning that we have maybe about just between 10 to 30% of the roof sheeting being affected. We also had the issue of those that are moderately damaged. And by moderately damaged, what we mean is that at least 50% of the roof sheeting would have been gone from the building. And of course, we would also have another classification where we say of highly damaged, in which case the entire roof structure would have been gone or blown away. That is the roof sheetings, the rafters, the pole line, and in some instances, even the roofing plates. Added to that, you know, we'll have issues with the walls of some of the buildings and, of course, the windows and doors. Completely damaged, we have to the tune of about 15%. And, of course, highly damaged, which is the highest level of form of destruction that we had, which is about 40% of the housing stock. We have been able to do the estimation so far, the preliminary valuation that we have come out with thus far is that we have suffered damages to the building to the tune of about $1 billion EC. And as you know that we have to build back with greater resilience, and we know that it has been very well championed from the very top, from the Prime Minister, and almost most of his briefing have made it abundantly clear that we're going to take the opportunity to build back better, and that will mean a higher level of resilience in our buildings. So clearly, there will be a difference between the damage and what the actual cost of repairs and replacement. And we have seen so far from our calculations, we have about $500 million will be needed in terms of the making provisions for increased resilience in the building park. So we're looking at a total for the housing sector of $1.5 billion EC dollars. Without further ado, I will allow the minister to give us, of course, government perspective. We know that we have gone so far with partnering with some of our various non-government institutions and local government as well in seeking to bring relief to the communities. We have gone through the phase so far where we had to provide tarpaulins and other means of shelter and comfort to the people. And we are also going to the phase right now of recovery, where we are working very tirelessly with the various social agencies of government, i.e. the Ministry of Social Services and, of course, of Education, where we are seeking to ensure that the persons within the shelters are accommodated with the repairs of the home so that we could free up the schools so that the schools could be used for the full recommencement of teaching classes to the school students. So I'll now ask the minister to give us some of the government policy directive going forward and his own comments and feedbacks on where we are so far. Honorable Austria.
Thank you very much, PS, and thanks to the press secretary, government's press secretary, for having invited the Ministry of Housing to speak to some of the issues within the ministry arising out of Hurricane Maria. Let me say a pleasant good morning to all Dominicans, those here and those overseas listening and watching this program, and to all our friends in the region, in the sub-region, in the region, and internationally, who over the last couple of months, almost like just a little over 2 months, have been tracking our progress and our response to what many have considered to be one of the most devastating hurricanes in the region, I dare say probably in the world. Because it's probably the first time that we have recorded a hurricane beyond Category 5, and I don't think that we have been able to categorize it thus far. Dominica sustained serious damage in all sectors, but significantly in the housing sector, where, as the peers told you, that 90% of the housing stock was impacted upon in one way or the other. Housing stands out because it's very visible, you can see it, and it's really the base of human suffering. I mean, food, clothing, and shelter, as we've been told, are the basic commodities really for human survival. And so the impact on the housing will go a long way into determining the level of poverty, the level of comfort that our people will really enjoy or not enjoying as a result of Hurricane Maria. It's well known that the government from 2006 had embarked on a very ambitious housing program, because we recognize from that time on that there were serious deficiencies in the housing stock. There were serious deficiencies in the quality of housing and in the need for repairs of those housing. And on top of that, we implemented the sanitary program, which was like the washroom program, where we were spending significant sums the last 2 years trying to correct that situation. But with Hurricane Maria, all this was washed into the river and into the sea, so we have to continue. But I can say to the people of Dominica and to the rest of the world that we are a resilient people. And as I normally say, we've been knocked down, but we're already beginning to stand up, as was articulated in the Prime Minister's Independence Address on November 3rd. So we are committed to ensuring that our people have decent housing. We'll start all over again if it means that. But thank God that we've had many friends before and even now after the hurricane, that we're very confident that while we can't put a time frame on it, that we will continue to provide the people of Dominica with decent housing and decent sanitation. So to say that the census of 2011 indicated to us that there were about 31,352 housing units on the island, 25,000 of which were occupied and the rest being vacant, but nonetheless they were there. 90% of that was destroyed to some degree, which I will explain to you in a little bit through the passage of tropical storm, hurricane, I keep saying it's a storm, Hurricane Maria. Some of the hardest hit areas were the Carinago territory, which suffered some 69% damage, and that was mainly through the effect of high winds. Roseau and Pottersville suffered some 60% damage, and that was really through flooding and by the river and the sea and river action. Point Michelle, 60% of damage, again through flooding and storm surges. And Benz, but the destruction in Benz was mainly for the agricultural sector. So these three communities were the hardest hit as far as housing is concerned. But a global picture has pointed out, and we arrive at these figures because following the aftermath, a number of public officers, over 100 from various departments, various ministries, were deployed on the ground to do assessments. And the exercise, with the help of the UN and the World UNDP, who were assisting funding the project, that we deployed these public officers, staff from Ministry of Housing, staff from Ministry of Sports, and all other government departments were sent out on the road to do the assessments. I've been advised that about 40% of that assessment, I mean more detailed assessment, have been completed, but we have preliminary reports. But the most detailed assessment, 40% has been completed, meaning that some 10,000 homes have been assessed in detail. But going back to the global picture, and as we said, the damage was somewhere pretty close to $1 billion in terms of damage, and that is the initial assessment, and would most likely increase by the time we complete the detailed assessment. We have homes which were slightly damaged. Well, let's start with 10% of the homes. There was no damage to 10% of the 31,352 homes, no damage at all. That's where we got the figure of to 90%. If 10% were not damaged, then 90% was in fact damaged. Of that, we had slightly damaged 15% of the stock, which is equivalent to 303,646 homes. And by slightly damaged, we mean that about 10% of the roofs were lost. Then we have the next category, which was moderately damaged, where 20% of the housing stock was moderately damaged. And that would involve some 50% of the roof gone, and the total number of homes so far was 5,332. Then we have another category which we describe as heavily damaged. And this was in the region of some 40% of the homes were heavily damaged, where they lost 100% of the roof and 10% of other aspects of the home, talking about the cladding and the windows and the doors. So this we describe as heavily damaged, 100% of the roof gone, amounting to some 12,500. And completely destroyed, we had 6,731 homes that were completely and totally destroyed, meaning flat down, everything flat down. And that totals our 31,352 homes. So that's the extent of the damage within the housing sector that was sustained as a result of Hurricane Maria. And now you can begin to feel the extent of damage and the extent of work that has to be done in the recovery process. Understanding that every single category of the population was impacted in one way or the other. And I dare say that some of the homes that were no damage was done would probably be in the region of those with concrete roofing, and these were those that really stood up. And so the ordinary man on the street, the mining community, the public officer, the retired person, everybody suffered some form of damage as a result of Maria. And what is the strategy moving forward? How do we begin to address that situation? Well, first of all, we have people in shelters, a number of shelters, and that information would be readily available for the Ministry of Social Services would have that information. And many of those shelters were public buildings, schools, churches, and some people in private homes. So the first order of business for us as a government is to get people out of the shelters. And we have done quite well in that regard, but we're still looking to move people out of those shelters. Now, one of the things that came out of Maria was the quality, the technology, and the strength of the houses that we built. And that is a major topic now being discussed. Were the houses strong enough? Are we adhering to the building codes? Are our building codes adequate? And we have said that we have to build back better, we have to build back stronger, we have to be more resilient in our construction methods and so on. And we have set out to review our own building code and to look at building codes from other jurisdictions, Miami in particular, which also suffer from severe storms and hurricanes. And we're looking at all those building codes and to see where we fell short, where our building codes were lacking. The initial response that we're having is that our building codes are not the worst off. Our building codes are sort of okay, except the supervision and application of those codes. That is where we seem to have had a problem in terms of, in the local language, we say taking shortcuts, not doing anything properly, not utilizing the hurricane ties where we're supposed to utilize them, putting the rafters too far apart, using less steel, using poor quality concrete, using poor quality roofing material. And some of those issues we begin to discover could have been responsible for the massive damage that we suffered in the housing sector. Further analysis has to be done on that, but I believe that's a starting point, supervision of the construction and how we address that situation moving forward. So that's the first thing. So how is it that we're going to get people in the and that may be a medium to long-term process. Now, how are we going to get these people out of the shelters and where are we going to put them? Well, we have come up with a concept that we can build what we call transitory homes, where it's a home for like the moment, so to speak, because we have to get people out of the schools. But transitory homes does not mean homes that are going to be built worse off than they were. Like, for example, you pass around the country and you see people trying to knock back their homes. You see people using used galvanized and straightening bended nails and using material as compromise. That's dangerous because it means that these homes will not even be able to sustain a category 2, far less from a category 5. Now, how do we treat with these people has to be a point of discussion. So we're going to build some homes. We will use the hurricane ties. We'll use the best building practices. But if it's transitory and temporary, at some point in time, we'll have to think of moving these people into stronger homes. And I can say to you that even before Maria, the government was undertaking, especially in the relocation of Pinet Savan and Dubik, we had begun a comprehensive, durable, hurricane-proof construction of over 350 homes. Now, many of these withstood Maria. So it seemed to me that the construction method that was being used on those homes was in fact adequate to sustain a category 5. We have been having discussions with companies, and there is a plan afoot by the government for the medium to long term to continue with that company to build some homes in Roseau, to build some homes in Georgetown, Granville, to build some homes in Cotton Hill in Portsmouth. We're looking at the Roseau Valley. We're looking at the Maho constituency, Layo Park, Taru. We're looking at Grand Bay and a number of other communities. We're looking to build these homes which have stood up to Hurricane Maria. And I'm sure that there will be further engagement with that company to construct homes across the country. And I'm saying this to say that some of the people that we're now putting into those transitory homes, especially in the Portsmouth area, because the Portsmouth Government School and the Portsmouth Secondary School, as I understand it, up to the beginning of this week, will still be used as shelters. And so we have Georgetown. Some of these people will find permanent homes in Georgetown. And some of the people at the Portsmouth Secondary School are basically from Lagon and Chance, will find permanent homes in the Cotton Hill development. So temporarily, we're moving them. We'll give them a decent roof. We'll use hurricane tiles. We'll use the best construction practices. They will have their washrooms. They'll have water. It's my understanding, and very shortly, the Prime Minister will make an announcement as to when we expect to begin works on the Cotton Hill and Georgetown, which will be very early in the new year, to begin works on that. Based on the speed at which this company delivers, I would think between the next 8 to 12 months, this home should be ready for occupation. And so we can see some people moving out of those transitory homes maybe within 8 to 1 year. So that's why it's just a transition. But they will be as comfortable or even more comfortable than they were in the homes that got blown down, because these are building people in the lesser quality type homes, and obviously much more comfortable than being in a shelter. And we don't have to go on to describe what life in a shelter is like, because it's a shelter. You're just passing through. So that is the plan we have. So the intention is to move people out of the shelter all across the country into temporary homes while we build or rebuild more permanent, more resilient, more hurricane-proof type buildings for those people all across the country. We have also signed an agreement with a company out of Barbados, the Prime Minister has alluded to that, out of St. Lucia, sorry, to construct 1,000 homes. The contract has been signed, and we've been advised that the 20 homes, the first 20, are in fact ready to be shipped. They have been constructed and ready to be shipped to Dominica. And the location for those would be 10 would be in Point Michelle, and 10 would be in the Kalinago territory. Obviously, as we said earlier on, these communities were heavily impacted, and so we have to move to bring back some confidence in the community and to bring back some hope and some comfort to the residents of those communities. The land has been identified, and we're just waiting the arrival of the containers, and so even probably before Christmas, we may see work beginning on those homes, which we are convinced are in fact hurricane resistant. You cannot speak to category 6 and 7. We don't know about those, but we believe that they're pretty resistant and we can withstand the hurricane of Maria. We visited the sites that these homes are in fact have been built in Barbados. Communities have been built, hospitals, supermarkets, restaurants, clinics have been built using that technology. We are, the PS and myself actually visited the site of some of these homes, and we're pretty satisfied based on the technical aspects and the literature on those homes, that they can withstand Category 5 hurricane. So we have entered into agreement. We have signed a contract for these 1,000 homes, and the construction of those homes and on the particular sites, we have some ideas, but I would like further discussion on it before we make it known to the public where those houses are going to be sited. We have had a number of companies, and we have sent out the invitations to companies both locally, regionally, and internationally who believe that they have a solution to housing that would withstand Category 5 to come with us. Let's discuss it. We have had invitations from Guyana, where they're talking about using green hat for construction. 2 companies out of Guyana have approached us on doing wooden homes out of green hat. And there's one out of Miami, I think there's one out of Montserrat. And a number of companies have been coming to us, asking us, telling us that they have the solution to our housing problem. But we have to tread very carefully with this, because we are in the process of building back better. Now, there is some skepticism about wooden homes and wooden houses, and that some people believe that Dominica should now begin to turn itself into a country of concrete homes. I don't subscribe to that. I would wait on the technicians, on the technical people to advise on that. I don't subscribe to that. I believe that there is a place for wooden homes. And we see a number of wooden homes stood up to the hurricanes, especially those also built a long time ago. Those our grandfathers and great-grandfathers built. They stood up to the hurricane, their roof and everything. Some of them may have lost the galvanized, but the rafters are still in place and the purlines are still in place. They just lost the galvanized. So if this could restore, and many of these homes we build in modern times, a lot of the damage is for roof. There's the galvanized and some rafters and so on. And I believe that there's a place for wooden home doing the sustainable, but it has to be done properly. We have to follow the building codes. We have to police the building codes to ensure that it's done properly. And we believe, yeah, you may want to question whether it's white pine or peach pine or green hat or purple hat or gommier or bois riviere. You may want to have a debate as to what wood is best. But there is, in fact, a room, and we're looking at all those possibilities, and every proposal will be analyzed on its merit, which will give the government an opportunity to make a decision as to how we want to move forward. So that's where we are. So we'll go back to the transitory homes. We'll build this. We'll put people in there. The next order of business is to deal with the tarpaulins. Now, tarpaulin is meant to be temporary. I mean, there's no... And I mean, some people have changed tarpaulins 2 or 3 times because some of them can stand the wind when it rains. And the tarpaulin brings back memories of Maria. And many of us don't want to think of Maria. People are still very paranoid about Maria. Rain starts falling and people start getting into a panic. Wind starts blowing and people start, based on the experience of Maria, that's experience nobody else don't want to have again. And so the tarpaulin on the roof does not help. And so the government have decided to move as speedily and as quickly as possible to remove the tarpaulins from people's roof and to assist them in putting a wooden and a zinc roof, at least to give them some comfort while they sleep. So that's another area that we'll be tackling like almost immediately as we speak to get rid of this. And work in some communities have begun on getting rid of those tarpaulins and putting decent roof over those people's heads. And the next priority really is the tents. Tents again are very temporary. You have senior citizens living in tents. You have large families living in tents. I went to some particular part of the country. There was this lady with 6 children and her grandmother living in a tent. You have to bend to enter into the tent and so on. So the tent really is not the most comfortable place you want to be for too long. It's nice that you move out of a shelter into a tent. It's nice that you can sleep dry, but it's not the most desirable living accommodation that anybody would want. And so we have to wage war on getting rid of those tents. We can hold them in our backyard for emergency purposes. We can hold them in the event that they'll be needed in the future. But we believe as a government that we need to get our people out of those tents. So the transitionary homes to get out of the shelter is priority. This maybe you can the tents can be either second or third priority. You can switch them around with the tents and leave tarpaulins if you wish. But these are 3 major priorities for the government right now as we speak, while we seek to develop the new building models that we want to move for permanence and permanent housing. These are some of the short-term interventions. I know that Christmas is a defining moment for many Dominicans, many Caribbean people, West Indian, and people worldwide. And so we would like to see how far we can get on that aspect before Christmas. And I'm not talking about Christmas Eve. I'm not talking about the 23rd of December, but I'm talking about before Christmas. See how many of these people. We may not be able to do all because you follow the extent of damage and the number of homes to be done. But as much as we could do before the Christmas season, starting last week, to try to get people into some more comfortable accommodation. Now, we have had tremendous support from the international community, both from governments and from NGOs and from foreign agencies. And on behalf of the government and the people of Dominica, I would really, really like to thank them for the interest that they've shown and this level of support they have given to us. Many of them have been involved in gathering information and gathering data, which is very, very important, since the information gathered will determine, first of all, the extent of the damage, secondly, what it's going to cost us to repair those damages, and thirdly, you have a document where you can make a case to the international community for assistance based on the data and the information. So some people have been say, well, 2 months and you guys still collecting information, so long the hurricane passed, let's get on with it. Yes, we need to get on with it, but without solid, hardcore information, you cannot really go out there to the international community and present a solid case. How much money do you need? How much money is required? How many homes have been damaged? How many homes you feel you can do in every year? And that sort of information you will get out of the data. And many of those humanitarian and NGO groups have been collecting information that we find to be very, very useful. And some of the assistance that you will get will be based on the information and the data that you can present, and you can make your case. Many of them have been involved in that. We have, among some of those groups, we have the International Office of Migration, the IMO. You have Samaritan's Purse, who've been doing a lot of tents and generators and solar lights. You have the shelter box. Are these the people with the tarpaulins, Jules? The shelter box, and over 25,000 tarpaulins have been made available to the country since the passage of Hurricane Maria. You have the UNDP, which is an organization that we're very well familiar with. We have the UN Aid. Digicel has come on board and offering to do some homes and some school repairs and to build some homes in the Kalinago territory. We have USAID. We have the Dominica Red Cross has been very active. And with the International Federation of the Red Cross, an affiliate of the Dominica Red Cross, they too have been very active. We also have Habitat for Humanity, with the office in Trinidad, who have come down and looking around to see how they can assist us in our building process. And we really need to thank them for the assistance they've given. They've pledged a lot. They've pledged a lot. They pledged building homes. They pledged repairing homes, different style, different brands. And we welcome this. But what we're saying is all this has to be done under the umbrella of building better, building more sustainable, and building more hurricane-resistant homes. So it's not just about coming and telling government of Dominica, well, I'm going to build you a couple of homes, but the planning has to be involved, the Ministry of Housing has to be involved, our engineers have to be involved to ensure that whatever is built can withstand something to the magnitude of Maria. So we need to thank all those institutions for their support. Many of them have indicated the areas within which they need to work. And we also have this company, it's out of Jamaica, a large construction company who donated over 14,000 sheets of galvanized to assist. But they have specified that they would like to begin their work in the Caribbean territory. We got some assistance out of Trinidad. We got some out of Barbados. And a number of countries and governments, Royal Caribbean Cruise, they've donated over 7 pallets of plywood and 24 pallets of 2x4s. Then we have this other group who donated about 18 bundles, Danzi Incorporated, of plywood. The Embassy of the Republic of Cuba has donated some 48 tons of cement, 150 tons of steel, 50 tons of blocks. The government of Trinidad and Tobago, who donated some 250 pallets of blocks, wheelbarrows, pickaxes, tarpaulins, nails, doors. And a number of agencies who came down to assess the situation have gone back to headquarters, and they have promised that in discussion with the headquarters, they will be determined what level of assistance and what level of support that they can give. I had a gentleman in my office yesterday from Trinidad who said that they've been raising some money and they will use this to purchase lumber out of Guyana so they can ship to Dominica so we can use in our construction efforts. So we really need to thank all these organizations. Mr. Jules has been liaising with them on a daily basis, knowing what they're doing and telling them exactly what we want done and how we want it done, and that process is ongoing. You've also heard too that in recent times, well, just yesterday and today, that the Prime Minister was in fact making some pronouncements as to how we intend to assist public officers who lost their roof or their homes by making $5 million available to the Government Housing Loan Board for on-lending. You also heard him say that we're looking at placing another $5 million at the aid bank to assist other categories of persons and senior citizens who have lost their roof. And some special arrangement will be made for the senior citizens who have no insurance, no income, and just nowhere to turn, so to speak, that the government will move in to assist them in reconstructing and repairing their homes, which is really in keeping with the philosophy of the Dominican Labour Party government. Remember that some years ago we put some $5 million at the aid bank for public officers, which allowed them to secure homes. We put another $5 million at 5%. That was, I think this one we're saying between 1 and 2.5%. We put money at the aid bank at 5%. We put money at the Government Housing Loans Board at 4%. And a number of public officers today will confess that they were only able to build their homes because of that facility created by the government at the Government Housing Loans Board. We can recall before that intervention, the mortgage interest rate was somewhere in the region of 9–10%. And at 5%, it gave public officers an opportunity to qualify for financing, and also to go home with a little more money that they could continue to survive while they meet their mortgage obligations. The same thing happened at the aid bank, where we put in the money at 5%, monies were at 5, at 10 and 11%, and a number of Dominicans, I think 51 families were able to benefit from that facility, and continuing in that vein, that even after such a major disaster like Maria, that totally devastated and destroyed the country, that has basically removed all sorts of revenue, tax revenue and so on, remove all sorts of revenue, we can come in and decide that we're going to continue to invest in the housing sector, because we believe that housing is a major factor in determining our poverty levels and how our country move forward and to climb out of the poverty index. So this is what the government is doing to assist. We have also declared that we will give a moratorium on duty-free on building materials for some 6 months from September, October. I think that goes until April, where you can now bring in your building material free of duty to assist in the reconstruction effort. So this is where government is at. This is some of the things that we've been doing. These are some of the ideas. And ideas continue to flow as we sit and as we engage various organizations, as we engage the international community. And I must say, whose eyes are really focused, the visit of the Secretary General of the UN some time ago was a major platform for us. Had the cameras on Dominica for a period. You had just last week the visit of His Royal Highness Prince Charles. That in fact put the focus, because you see, we're not the only one going through that crisis at this time. We have Antigua, you have Tortola, you have Barbuda. We have Barbuda, St. Croix, and Thomas. So a number of countries have been impacted this hurricane season. And so the media, there's enough for the international media to go around. I mean, there's enough to see, there are enough stories to catch. And we have been ensuring that we keep the light shining brightly on Dominica as far as our recovery and reconstruction efforts are concerned. There are a number of private sector organizations throughout the region who are doing concerts. I think there was a concert in St. Lucia, there was a concert in Antigua, and I think there's a major concert coming up in Jamaica, maybe tonight or later today, with all this Beanie Man and Usain Bolt and all these celebrities. And we'll be coming together in a benefit concert to benefit all those countries, really, that were impacted by Maria and Irma earlier on. And so we really need to thank the promoters. I want to thank the people behind those activities. We want to thank all the people performing and participating in those activities in raising funds to assist not only Dominica, but the entire Caribbean region. Because we need to understand it that today is Dominica's, and I never found more comfort when after St. Martin and Anguilla, and I think it was Tortola got hit, that the government, the Prime Minister was quick. And he was criticized for it, really, and we have to be frank and honest. He was criticized for coming out and seeking to assist those countries. In fact, there was a school of thought that rather than send our monies to assist these people, we should buy plane tickets and bring our people out of those countries back to Dominica. There was that discussion. But less than 2 weeks after, here it is, that Dominica is in a worse position now than these countries were when we sought to reach out to them and to assist them. And I'm sure that this is probably one of the reasons why we have the goodwill of the rest of the world and why so many people want to assist Dominica, because we showed in time of crisis in other countries that we're quite prepared to share the little that we have. In fact, there was some money for our airport that the Prime Minister said, look, you can hold back on the airport and let's send these funds to those countries that were ravaged by, it was Irma at the time. And so this region is very, very vulnerable. It's Dominica today, it's St. Lucia tomorrow, it's Grenada next week. And so we all have to come together now. And I believe this hurricane season has taught us one thing, even in our communities, in Dominica, in the villages, where we have to come together, because that night of Maria, it was one trying to help the other until none of us could help ourselves. So we all battened down on our inside, even after we had lost our roofs, but we couldn't go outside. But even before that happened, you could feel around the community that people who had never spoken for years were calling out on their neighbor, how are you, where are you, come by me, and so on. And I believe that Maria brought a certain level of unity in the country. And what I'm hoping is that level of unity will continue, because we're going to need it as we continue to rebuild the country. Because this is not about government. This is not about Roosevelt's scary. The government alone cannot rebuild the country following the passage of Maria. It has to be the effort of every single Dominican. As little as you can do, it will be appreciated, and it will go a long way into helping the whole, into helping the total recovery process. And I firmly believe, if I know my Prime Minister very well, if we have to use his past successes in raising resources, because really, to depend on Dominica to generate those resources from within, I have not seen the evidence. I've heard a lot of talk, but I've not seen the evidence as to how we can raise the resources that we require to build the country on our own. And so we have to look externally, we have to think creatively, we have to look outside of the box, as they would normally say in modern language. We cannot continue doing the same things. We have to expand our relations, which is what we've been doing. Venezuela, China, and all those new diplomatic relationships that we have been building over the years, I believe we will see all of them coming into play in that very difficult period. And so my confidence, and the confidence of the government, that we can do it. We can rebuild our country. We can rebuild a better country. And we can serve as an example to the rest of the world as to what a small country can achieve after being devastated by that storm, how we were able to do it, and what can be achieved if we come together, if we work together, if we say the right things at the right time, in the right places. Because the biggest problem we have in this country is our mouth. We talk too much and we don't think sufficiently. But we have to talk less. We have to listen and we have to see. That's why you have 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. It means you talk less, you listen more, and you open your eyes and you look around you and to see what is happening and take the best decisions. The leadership of the country has been exemplary since Maria. Nobody can doubt it, that we've made tremendous progress in the last 2 months. If you look at the other countries that suffered through Emma or whatever, you speak with the people, whether it's, well, I don't want to call names, whether it's Puerto Rico, you can ask President Trump about that. Whether it's St. Thomas and St. Croix, you can also ask President Trump about that. And I don't want to go calling names of countries, but we have made remarkable progress. The leadership of the Prime Minister has been exemplary in that regard. He's been trotting the globe, he's been traveling all over the globe, seeking to raise the awareness, seeking to bring to the attention of the international community where we are. But not only where we are in terms of the damage that was caused by Maria, and in terms of what is required to fix it, but his vision of building a more resilient and sustainable country. And I believe he's been going to those meetings, and I think that he's being listened to. I think he's catching the attention. I think that his words and his pronouncement are falling on the correct ears. And I have no doubt that all his visits by the Prime Minister will in fact bear fruit to the benefit of Dominica. And a number of people are coming to Dominica. I've been acting Prime Minister, and I've met a number of people who come in and say, how are you guys going to do it? What are some of the plans you have? How are you going to do it? But we like the concept of building a more resilient country, a country that can be able to weather the storm of climate change, which is a real phenomenon that we have to be faced with. And that is the message that we send to the international community. Here it is, small country, developing country. We had gone a long way before Maria. We were moving ahead nicely before Maria, took everything away from us. But there's an opportunity to show the world that we can rebuild our country in a more resistant, in a more sustainable manner. And that is the message that our Prime Minister has been pushing. And that's not just a message for Dominica, but that's a message for the OECS, that's a message for CARICOM. So when the Prime Minister speaks, he speaks not only about the Dominica story, but he speaks about the story of the region, and he speaks about the story of the world. And that is where we are. And here goes our confidence as a government, and we want to instill that confidence in our people that we're down, but we're not out. And as long as you're not out, you can, it's like a boxer. He's down, but he's doing the count, 7, 8, 9, but before the 10th count, he's back on his feet, and he continues fighting. And many, many times, these boxers, they win their boxing matches. The resilience, the courage, the energy, the motivation, that is what we're asking Dominicans to be at this particular point in time. And to tell you that you have a government who knows, who understands it, we did it before, who knows what has to be done, and who will continue to work in the best interest of Dominica and to continue to make Dominica the beacon that it was before Maria, and maybe a brighter beacon in the post-Maria period, where everybody will want to learn the Dominica story. What has Dominica done to be in such a position in such a short time after Maria? And I'm not asking you for 15, 25, 30 years, which I've been hearing on the street. That's what it's going to take. That's what the ordinary man tells you, that Dominica is so badly hit that it will take another 30 years before we come back to where we were. I don't subscribe to that. I believe in a much shorter period, we'll be able to count the blessings that have been bestowed upon us, and that will be reflected in the rate at which we'll continue to build and to develop our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the Honourable Reginald Austry, the Minister for Housing, Lands and Water Resource Management, the Member of Parliament for the Cottage constituency, for the policy direction of the Government of Dominica. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, as we continue with the press briefing, I will call on Mr. Hilarion Jules, who is the housing manager, and he will talk predominantly about the partnership with humanitarian groups that have been ongoing since the passage of Hurricane Maria. Mr. Jules.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Aaron. The Honorable Prime Minister, the Honorable Minister for Housing, Mr. Austri, articulated our relationship, our friendship, our admiration for the humanitarian groups in Dominica. And there are quite a number of the groups here, and the IOM, International Office of Migration, is really the coordinating arm of all of these humanitarian groups, which includes Israel Aid, Samaritan's Purse, Shelter Box, UNDP, Digicel Foundation, Red Cross, quite a number of groups throughout the country. They came in very early and have been participating in the relief process in Dominica. And they're here as well, they're still here participating in the recovery process. While participating in these processes, the humanitarian groups have conducted what is referred to as tracking matrices or tracking matrix. They've conducted vulnerability assessments of vulnerability groups, assessments in terms of shelter, and NFIs, that is non-food items. They've been very much involved in that. As indicated by the Honorable Minister, some 25,000 plus tarpaulins have been distributed throughout the country, and that has assisted us, albeit a temporary measure, to rehouse persons. They've been involved in the distribution of tents as well. But it must be noted that they've also been involved in the distribution of kitchen kits, toiletries, hygiene kits, blankets, clothing, mosquito nets, and they are at the stage of gathering building materials to assist us in the recovery process. As the Honorable Minister mentioned, we are now at the stage of transition houses whereby persons in shelters, internally displaced persons in shelters, to move out from these shelters into transition homes. And so we've been receiving materials from friendly governments and agencies, but even these humanitarian groups themselves, with some of their own funds, have procured building materials, and they are partnering with us here in Dominica as we go on in the recovery, the transition stage of housing here in Dominica. So we really want to be thankful to the humanitarian groups. They conduct these assessments in the shelters, and they've indicated their findings as to reasons why persons have not been able to move out of the shelters yet and move into their homes. What do they need? And they've said they've picked up, and we ourselves have picked it up as well, that in terms of roofing sheets, persons said they need roofing sheets. Some 39 persons of shelters indicate that they need roofing sheets. About 25% require timber for construction. Some need tools, or some 16%. And even blocks as well. Some 5% or so of the persons in shelters have indicated to us and the humanitarian groups that is where their needs are. But we've also spoken of the comprehensive building damage assessment that is going on throughout the country, and that exercise is that comprehensive that it is going to inform policy as far as the reconstruction phase is concerned. And the Honorable Minister spoke to the various initiatives that are being undertaken as far as the reconstruction phase is concerned. One point that we've not mentioned as yet that I would want to speak to is that the aspect of training. And we were fortunate over a 2-week period in Dominica to have with us the Barbadian national, Mr. Grenville Phillips, who is the president of Walbrent College. And Mr. Phillips was here conducting training on repairing and rebuilding of roofs and timber frame buildings in Dominica. The training was conducted far and wide in some 12 communities throughout the country. And from all reports, the information was very, very, very well received. In the quest to build back our roofs stronger, Mr. Phillips proposed quite a number of initiatives, and we're thankful to the Government Information Service, GIS, who's recorded one of those sessions, and it is my understanding that after editing, this will be placed on the YouTube channel for the population to benefit from it. So yes, this training was conducted by Mr. Grenville Phillips, and artisans, builders, contractors benefited, but also the advertisement called for homeowners, bankers, insurance companies, and particularly in the urban environment when the training was conducted, and more specifically the final one that was conducted at the Newton Primary School last Friday. The room was full, in excess of possibly 200 persons were there, a lot of homeowners, and the information was very, very well received. Mr. Phillips emphasized the use of hurricane straps and ties throughout the roofing system to ensure that our roofs are stronger. It's all of this technical language, like I indicated, it's recorded and will be on the YouTube channel, so we will benefit from that. But just to say that in the event that persons do not have access to the internet, do not have access to YouTube for now, and they still wish to receive that information, we at the Ministry of Housing are ready and willing to assist in disseminating that information. The Honorable Minister made mention of the fact that persons are indicating that they want to go into concrete, but we still see the need for timber. And in fact, we have interest coming from Trinidad and Guyana by way of timber. Mr. Phillips took the liberty to speak to a technical term that we call shear walls. Time does not permit me to get into shear walls right now, but yes, even in timber buildings we can have what is referred to as shear walls, and these will enable our buildings to be stronger, of course with the addition of all these metal straps and ties in the roofs. This will enable our buildings to be stronger. So all is not lost. We are approaching the reconstruction phase, and we are hoping that all of this training, in fact the Ministry of Planning, Physical Planning Division are currently conducting training for builders and contractors, particularly in the use of the building codes. So we do hope that the fact that we've been impacted so severely by Hurricane Maria, it will behoove us, homeowners, to avail ourselves of the opportunities, of the information needed as we proceed in Dominica in the process of building back better and stronger. So we really want to express our thanks to Mr. Grenville Phillips, the Caribbean Development Bank, who facilitated his visit here in Dominica. And also we want to express our thanks to the various humanitarian groups coordinated by IOM who are here on island participating with us as we move from relief to recovery to reconstruction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jules. And the final speaker for this morning will be the Senior Property Valuer, Mr. Bernard Lloyd, and he will talk this morning primarily about cost. Mr. Lloyd.
Let me say good morning to all listening. The presence of the minister is recognized, the permanent secretary, the manager of housing division, and the press. Cost as it relates to buildings post-Hurricane Maria. A lot of people have been asking that question. I mean, from moving around the country, persons have been asking about the construction costs. What happens to construction costs post-Maria? In the whole effort of building back better, I say to persons sometimes that it is likely that cost may increase. It is highly likely that cost will increase because we're gonna basically change some of the building concepts, the roofing in particular, because quite a lot of the damage that you see on island is really focused on the roof. I say sometimes that the tagline we adopted after Tropical Storm Erica, the tagline of building back better, I think now is the perfect opportunity. Now that the damage is more wholesome in nature, now is the perfect opportunity to build back better. I also think it's a perfect opportunity to build back Dominica better. I think we can have a more resilient Dominica in terms of our structures, a more modern Dominica. Let's come up to par. We were, like the minister said earlier on, we were well on our way prior to Hurricane Maria. Like some people say, it has stopped us in our tracks. But I think the government is committed to assist Dominicans, asking Dominicans to be patient. You have to be patient. I mean, the damage, as you see out there, is insurmountable. It will take some time. I know everybody wants to see their roofs on and so forth, but this is going to take some time. The question is, why rush it? And God forbid next year we have another catastrophic event, and then we're back to the same place. So we're just asking Dominicans to be patient, and then things will work out for us. The impact on the economy, I mean, like the minister said a while ago, housing and infrastructure is visible. We all see what has happened. 90% of the housing stock has been damaged in one way or the other. So it means that with that level of damage, it would have had a serious impact on the economy. Serious impact on the economy. But government, like I said, is committed to the task ahead. We will do our best. Be patient with the Ministry of Housing. I mean, there's quite a lot of work to be done, but we are committed to the task ahead. Really building damage assessment being undertaken. Quite a lot of work has been done. Like we said earlier, the figure is onto like 10,000, I think. And then most of the areas, the central Roseau area is about 75% complete. Areas of Kings Hill, the Roseau Valley, these areas have already been completed. We have teams all over the countryside, whether it's north, south, east, or west, that have been working tirelessly every day. In the weather condition as it may, teams have been working tirelessly every day, and it is hoped that by the end of the year, we'll have completed our quota of some 26,000 buildings in Dominica. That task could not be done only by the Ministry of Housing, and here I am taking the opportunity to thank the various ministries, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Sports, for coming on board and partnering with us, and also the UNDP team, who have been working tirelessly in order to achieve our target. I will say again that we have to be resilient. I remember the words of, I think it was Dennis Joseph, who said some time ago, he referred to the trees and the growth of the trees. When I looked out my window this morning, the whole Mount Daniel Ridge is already green. And I say, wow, Dominica is really the nature isle of the Caribbean. I think we should at best, pattern our lives with the trees in terms of the growth process moving forward. I know we're going to need a lot more resources. As humans, we need financial resources to push us forward. But at least we can take a note from that as we move forward. And let's just aim to be who we want to be. We're going to get there. I am confident. We have seen the changes in the countries. I mean, in the country, you move around and you see the face of the place is starting to change post Hurricane Maria. So I wish us well. We are the ministry. We will assist in whatever we can, and that's it. All the best, Dominica. God bless Dominica. Thanks very much.
Mr. Lloyd, thank you very much. At this time, we will take questions from the media to the various presenters here. I already see Joseph Thomas, the regular, with a question.
Thank you very much. Actually, I want to begin my questionnaires by forwarding this question from a listener out of Barbados, Mr. Julian Rogers. He's listening, and he has asked to provide the name of the company expected to build the 1,000 prefab or prefabricated homes. I don't know if the Honourable Minister might be in a position to give us that, or the Permanent Secretary. And of course, I have a number of questions myself. So the name of the company expected to.
Okay, the name of the company in Barbados is Preconco, and what they're building is precast, pre-stressed concrete homes, and they can come either in concrete roof or in wooden roof. But they have a subsidiary company in St. Lucia, which is Sustainable Housing Solutions Limited, SHSL. But it's a subsidiary company registered Blackmore in St. Lucia. But the parent company is Preconco out of Barbados, and the SHSL, Sustainable Housing Solutions Limited, is registered in St. Lucia.
Thank you very much, Minister. Mr. Lloyd, this question is for you. Since you're the last speaker, I'm going to start with you. The whole question of the cost involved in, the rebuilding process in terms of the housing stock, I don't think you provided us with some details as far as that is concerned. Could you do that for us, please?
Okay, thanks very much. Based on the data that we have at hand, for the various categories, we have buildings with no damage, the slightly damaged building, the completely destroyed buildings, the highly damaged buildings, and so on. We have tagged an initial figure of some $1.5 billion to reconstruct, repairs, and whatever. It's actually $1.5 billion as it stands now. That figure is preliminary in nature. It came out of a rapid assessment of the damage that was conducted right after the hurricane. Our building damage assessment that we are presently conducting will better inform us when it is fully completed. But as it is now, we are tagged at $1.5 billion Eastern Caribbean dollars. Cost of damages.
I notice a lot of emphasis has been placed on the 90%. It would seem as if that in terms of the damage that was done, have you not, or have you, or has your office looked at the 10%, the so-called 10% that were not damaged? Because even if those with the concrete roofs, even if they were not impeded somewhat, even if windows were not broken, there is a lot. In fact, the house in which I live, a lot of seepage with water, that sort of thing. Is there some sort of assessment to those structures to determine the vulnerability of them in the future as far as that is concerned? Because yes, I may not have gotten blown away, I may have gotten a little bit of water, whatever it is, that would certainly, do something to the structure. So is there a sort of assessment going around that will determine the real strength of that sort of structure, say, going forward for a next storm, whatever? Okay,
I'm with you on that. The assessment that we're carrying out really encompasses all buildings, including those that are not damaged. Where possible, we will make further recommendations, because basically we have teams out there, like I said earlier. We have persons with certain levels of technical competencies. Where possible, we will refer certain structures to, let's say, an engineer for further evaluation. But all buildings are being assessed, even buildings that were not damaged. I live in a building with a concrete roof myself, and that is part of the general assessment. So it's really 100% of buildings are being assessed. And part of the assessment, the damage assessment, one component of it that will come out in the end is what we refer to as a building census. Although we have some information from the Statistics Division, but that was information from 2011. So out of that exercise will be what we refer to as a building census. So we'll have, for instance, the total number of concrete buildings, the total number of timber buildings, the total number of mixed constructed buildings, timber and concrete. So I think it's a very essential exercise, and a lot of decisions could be made later on based on the information contained or that will be gathered from that exercise.
Mr. Jules, good day to you, sir. I think you mentioned about building back better. And the question which comes to mind for me is how do we go about, and I think mention was made by the Honorable Minister and Mr. Blackmore about, you know, adhering to codes and whatever it is and the supervision which goes into. The thinking is that pre-Maria that a lot of supervision wasn't or didn't go into the structures that were being built. How is the division expected to look at that in its projection in terms of supervising, making sure that those codes and ethics are being adhered to?
To your question, Mr. Joseph, I will hasten to add that the Housing Division, the Ministry of Housing, we're primarily responsible for, as it relates to housing, construction of houses, home repairs for the government of Dominica. But when it comes to adherence to codes, that really falls under the ambit of the Ministry of Planning, the Physical Planning Division. Nonetheless, I always say that we at the Ministry of Housing, we don't exonerate ourselves because we are all one in the same boat. And so something is brought to the attention of the Ministry of Housing. We do have technical officers. We go out and assist in that process. But by and large, when one has plans drawn, it is sent to the Physical Planning Division, and upon approval, the house owner gets a set of plans, well, their set of plans approved. And the development control officers of the Physical Planning Division are the ones who go out to conduct all of these inspections to ensure that persons are constructing as per the approved plans. Nonetheless, I'm saying that we are homeowners, and if we choose to take shortcuts, it's to our detriment. I think Maria has awakened all of us, and I don't think that there is any homeowner now who's going to endeavor to take any shortcuts. In fact, when Mr. Phillips was conducting the training, we really asked homeowners to come. And the number of homeowners who now came out and participated and benefited from that training, they're now referring to themselves as watchdogs for the builders and contractors who are going to construct for them. Okay, so I think there is a certain level of empowerment and active citizenship happening, because it is your home, it is your biggest lifetime investment that will be compromised if you, the homeowner, don't pay attention to it. Yes, it is a very technical subject, construction, but it is not one that is so technical that each and every person who resides under a house should not pay attention to. Yeah, so we are our own supervisors as well as the Ministry of Housing, as the Physical Planning Division.
All right, I seem to be the only one asking questions here, but I have just one final, well, probably not a question. We're accustomed to the phrase in Dominica, tout chaud, tout flamme. You know, we start something, and, you know, after a couple of months, we just, you know, sideline it for some reason. I am hoping that with all the players involved, the Government Information Service, for instance, your department, your division, we will see a continuous presence, a continuous mindset that we've got to, you know, do this thing right all of the time. I'm hoping that all the players will will be part of the process, that the Ministry of Housing, the the housing division, whatever it is, physical planning, will come on board and ensure that there is a continuous presence of video or whatever it is, so that people continue to build better. And in terms of policing it, I would like to know that, you know, whichever division is responsible for doing it, does it properly, and more so the homeowners, to ensure that we, you know, build a better Dominica, as it were, going forward. That is just my final comment on this whole exercise.
Thank you for your final and previous comments, Mr. Thomas. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I just will take the opportunity to thank all of the presenters this morning in this most important ministry at this time, the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Water Resource Management, and is headed by the Minister for Housing, Lands and Water Resource Management, Honourable Reginald Austrie. I will add again the Member of Parliament for the Cottage constituency. We thank you. The Permanent Secretary, Mr. Lucian Blackmore, the Housing Manager, Mr. Hilarion Jules, and the Senior Property Valuer, Mr. Bernard Lloyd. Again, all from the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Water Resource Management. We thank all of you. We thank the media here and those of you listening and participating overseas as well. One and all, have a great day.